The screaming started at dawn. Princess Zara's eyes snapped open as the alarm crystals throughout the Etherean palace shrieked their warning. She rolled from her biosilk bed, her silver-blue skin shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed. With her racing heartbeat, the geometric tattoos along her arms, marks of royal blood, began to glow brighter as adrenaline flooded her system. "Your Highness?" Her guard captain Vex burst through the chamber doors without ceremony. His normally composed demeanor had cracked, revealing the terror beneath. The humans. "They've broken through the outer defense grid." Zara's breath caught. For 3 cycles, the war had raged between the Etherean Empire and the savage human colonies, but never had the primitive warriors made it past their first line of defense. The humans were supposed to be nothing more than a nuisance, barely evolved creatures with crude weapons and shorter lifespans than a single Etherean season. She moved to the crystalline viewing wall that overlooked the capital city of Luminos. What she saw made her blood turn to ice. Sleek human ships, their hulls scarred by battle, swooped between the towering spires of her city like predatory birds. Green energy blasts erupted from their weapons, turning her people's beautiful crystal architecture into glittering debris. But it wasn't the destruction that froze her, it was the precision, it's the tactical brilliance. This wasn't the wild assault of primitive savages. This was the calculated strike of a superior military force. "How many?" she whispered. 12 ships, Your Highness, but they fight like 100. Vex's voice trembled. "Our forces are ... retreating." The word hit her like a physical blow. The mighty Etherean fleet, retreating from a handful of human vessels? It was impossible. It was humiliating. It was ... A new sound cut through the air, a deep, thrumming roar that seemed to vibrate through her very bones. Zara pressed against the viewing wall and looked up. Single human fighter craft descended through the smoke and chaos, moving with an elegance that defied its blocky, utilitarian design. As she watched, it executed a perfect spiral maneuver around one of her people's fastest interceptors, then unleashed a burst of energy that sent the Etherean ship spinning into the palace's lower gardens. The human pilot was good, better than good he was. ... Beautiful in his destruction. "Princess, we must evacuate you to the bunkers," Vex urged, but Zara barely heard him. Her eyes were locked on that single fighter as it carved through her city's defenses like they were made of air. Something stirred deep in her chest, not fear, but something far more dangerous. Recognition. Her hand moved unconsciously to the crystal pendant at her throat, the one that had grown warm against her skin for the first time in her cycles of life. According to the ancient texts, the Heartstone would only react to one thing, the presence of a destined mate. But that was impossible. Her mate couldn't be human, could it? The fighter craft suddenly changed course, abandoning its attack run to hover directly outside her chamber. Through the viewing wall, she could see into the cockpit. The pilot turned his head toward her window, and for one impossible moment, their eyes met across the space between species and war. He was young, perhaps 30 human years, with dark hair and intense brown eyes that seemed to burn even through the distance. Scars marked his face, evidence of countless battles, but it was his expression that stopped her breath. He wasn't looking at her with the hatred she expected. He was looking at her with ... wonder. The pendant at her throat pulsed with sudden, brilliant light. The human pilot's eyes widened. His lips moved, forming a single word she couldn't hear but somehow understood. "You." Then, alarms screamed louder. Energy blasts erupted around his ship, and he was forced to bank away, disappearing into the smoke and chaos of battle. But the damage was done. In that moment of connection, Zara's world had shifted on its axis. "Princess," Vex grabbed her arm. "We have to go. Now." But Zara couldn't move. Her mind reeled with impossible implications. The ancient prophecies spoke of a time when Etherean and human bloodlines would unite to bring peace to the galaxy. She'd always dismissed them as fairy tales. But the Heartstone didn't lie. It couldn't lie. A massive explosion rocked the palace, sending crystal fragments raining down around them. The human assault was intensifying, but Zara barely noticed. All she could think about was those dark brown eyes, and the way her very soul had recognized them. Her destined mate was out there, somewhere in the battle, trying to destroy everything she held dear. And somehow, she had to find him before one of them ended up dead. Chapter 2. The warrior's code captain Marcus Chen pulled his fighter out of a screaming dive, the GI forces threatening to crush him into his pilot's seat. His targeting system locked onto another Etherian cruiser, but his finger hesitated on the trigger. Something was wrong with this mission. Something had been wrong from the very beginning. "Phoenix Leader, you're drifting off target," came the voice of his second-in-command through the comm. "The palace defense grid is still active." "Copy that, Phoenix 2, Marcus replied, but his heart wasn't in it. 3 hours ago, he'd been leading a routine patrol when the emergency orders came through, a loud assault on the Etherian capital. No negotiations, no quarter. Total victory or death, it was the kind of order that made his stomach churn. Marcus had been fighting this war for 5 years. Ever since the first Etherian expansion fleets had started claiming human colony worlds, he'd lost friends, family, everything he cared about to their advanced weapons and cold efficiency. But this felt different. This felt like murder. He banked around another crystal spire, his ship's sensors painting the city in tactical overlays. Civilian populations everywhere, hospitals, schools, whatever justification command had given for this assault. It wasn't sitting right with him. "Phoenix Leader, we've got movement on the palace observation deck," his wingman reported. "Could be a high-value target." Marcus adjusted his scope and felt his world stop. There, pressed against what looked like a crystal viewing wall, was the most beautiful being he'd ever seen. She was clearly Etherian, the silver-blue skin and luminescent. Markings gave that away, but everything else about her defied his expectations. Where he'd expected cold alien features, he found delicate beauty. Where he'd expected the arrogance of a conquering species, he saw ... fear, vulnerability, and something else. Something that made his chest tighten with an emotion he couldn't name. She was looking directly at him, not at his ship, not at the battle raging around them, but at him. Through the cockpit glass, across the impossible distance, their eyes met. And Marcus felt something fundamental shift inside his ribcage. This was wrong. Everything about this assault was wrong. But seeing her, knowing she was in danger... "Phoenix Leader, do you have a target lock?" came the voice through his comm. Marcus's finger moved to the trigger. Standard protocol would be to eliminate any high-value targets in the palace. If she was royalty, donned everything about her bearing, suggested she was then taking her out, could end the war in humanity's favor. But he couldn't do it. Looking at her, Marcus felt like he was seeing color for the first time after a lifetime of black and white. She was ... perfect and terrified, and somehow familiar, like a dream he'd been having his entire life without remembering. "Negative. On the target lock," he lied. Too much interference from the crystal structure. He pulled his ship away from the palace, but not before he saw her press her hand against the viewing wall. Something around her neck was glowing, a brilliant light that seemed to pulse in rhythm with his own heartbeat. "All units, this is command." A new voice crackled through the comm system. "Priority Alpha message. The assault has been called off. Pete, the assault has been called off. All units return to base immediately." Marcus blinked in surprise. Called off after all this destruction. But he didn't question the order. Something about this whole mission had felt wrong from the start, and he was grateful for an excuse to retreat. As he guided his fighter back toward the human fleet, his mind kept returning to those silver eyes. Who was she? Why had seeing her felt like coming home? And why did every instinct in his body scream that leaving her behind was the worst mistake of his life? 3 hours later, Marcus stood in the debriefing room aboard the flagship Defiance, trying to make sense of what he'd just experienced. Admiral Harrison, a grizzled veteran with more scars than original skin, paced before the assembled pilots. "The assault was a test," Harrison announced without preamble. "Intelligence needed to evaluate Etherian defensive capabilities. You performed admirably, but the real mission starts now." Marcus felt his blood chill. Sir, we've received a diplomatic communication from the Etherean Empire. They want to negotiate. Apparently, our little demonstration convinced them that continued warfare would be ... costly. Harrison's smile was predatory. They're sending a delegation to the neutral station Meridian Prime. We're sending one too. Who's going, sir? Asked Lieutenant Torres, Marcus's wingman. Small team. Scientists, diplomats, security. Harrison's eyes fixed on Marcus. Captain Chen, you'll be leading the military escort. Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. Sir, with respect, wouldn't Commander Bradley be more appropriate for a diplomatic mission? Bradley doesn't have your particular qualifications. Harrison activated a holographic display showing Marcus's service rec. Ord. 5 years of combat experience against Etherean forces, fluent in their trade language. And according to our psychological profiles, you have an unusual ability to see beyond species boundaries. The Admiral leaned forward, his voice dropping, to a whisper that somehow carried more threat than a shout. The truth is, Chen, we don't trust them. This negotiation could be a trap. If it is, we need someone who can get our people out alive. You're the best pilot we have. Marcus nodded, trying to ignore the voice in his head that whispered this was no coincidence. The timing was too perfect. The specific selection of him for this mission, right after he'd locked eyes with what was clearly Etherean royalty... When do we leave, sir? 24 hours, and Chen? Harrison's expression softened slightly. Be careful out there. The Ethereans are more dangerous than most people realize. Beautiful, intelligent, and completely ruthless. Don't let them get into your head. Too late for that, Marcus thought as he saluted and left the briefing room. His head was already full of silver-blue skin and eyes like starlight. The only question now was whether he was flying toward salvation or straight into the most elegant trap ever devised. Either way, he had to know the truth about the woman who'd stolen his breath with a single glance. #. Chapter 3. Diplomatic Deceptions. The neutral station Meridian Prime hung in space like a massive crystal flower, its bioluminescent hull pulsing with soft colors that indicated peaceful intent. Princess Zara stood at the observation deck of her diplomatic vessel, watching the human ships dock on the opposite side of the station. Her heart hammered with an anticipation she didn't dare acknowledge. Your Highness, the human delegation has arrived, announced Chancellor Rith, her father's most trusted advisor. The elderly Etherean skin patterns flickered with nervousness. Are you certain you wish to proceed with this unusual approach? Zara kept her eyes fixed on the docking bay, where human shuttles were disgorging their passengers. Somewhere among those figures in their bulky environmental suits was the pilot who'd changed everything for her. The one whose eyes had awakened something in her soul she'd never known existed. The Heartstone has never been wrong, Chancellor, she said quietly, touching the crystal pendant at her throat. It had been glowing steadily for the past 24 hours, growing brighter as they approached the station. If the ancient prophecies are true, if Rith interrupted sharply, Your Highness, with the greatest respect, these are dangerous games. Your father sent you to negotiate a ceasefire, not to chase mystical fairy tales. Zara turned to face him, and Rith stepped back at the intensity in her silver eyes. My father sent me because he believes I have the best chance of understanding our enemies. He doesn't know how right he is. The truth was more complicated than that. Emperor Valeris had been furious when she'd volunteered for the diplomatic mission. For 3 days he'd raged about sending his only heir into potential danger. But Zara had been relentless, using every argument at her disposal. The humans had proven they were more dangerous than anyone had realized. Traditional diplomatic approaches had failed. Perhaps a fresh perspective, a younger voice, could find common ground. She hadn't mentioned the Heartstone. She hadn't mentioned the face that haunted her dreams, or the certainty that her destiny was somehow tied to their enemies. Some truths were too dangerous to speak aloud. The briefing begins in 1 hour, Rith said stiffly. Remember, Your Highness, these creatures are cunning. They may appear primitive, but they've managed to hold off our forces for 5 years. Do not underestimate them." Zara nodded absently, but her attention was already elsewhere. Through the observation window, she could see figures moving through the station's corridors. One of them tall, dark-haired, moving with the predators. Grace made her breath catch. It was him. Even at this distance, even through the environmental suits and tactical gear, she knew. The Heartstone pulsed with brilliant light, confirming what her soul already recognized. Her destined mate was here. Asterisk, 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 Marcus had been in tense situations before. But walking through the corridors of Meridian Prime felt like stepping into a minefield. The station's neutral status meant both species had agreed to minimal weapons and security protocols. But that didn't make the situation any less dangerous. The Etherians were waiting for them in Conference Chamber 7. Marcus had spent the entire shuttle ride trying to convince himself he wasn't hoping to see a particular pair of silver eyes. Dr. Sarah Walsh, the expedition's lead xenobiologist, walked beside him reviewing her notes. "Remember, Captain, Etherian's social hierarchy is extremely complex. Royal bloodlines are considered sacred. If we're dealing with nobility, any perceived insult could scuttle these negotiations before they begin." "Understood," Marcus replied, though his mind was elsewhere. The closer they got to the conference chamber, the more restless he felt. It was like an itch between his shoulder blades, a sense that something momentous was about to happen. They entered the chamber, and Marcus felt his world tilt. She was there. The woman from the palace, sitting at the far end of an elegant crystalline table that seemed to grow from the floor itself. She wore formal robes in deep blue that highlighted her luminescent skin patterns, and her silver hair was arranged in an elaborate style that marked her as royalty. But it was her eyes that captured him, those same startling silver eyes that had haunted his thoughts for days. She was looking directly at him, and the recognition in her gaze was unmistakable. "I am Princess Zara of the House of Eternal Stars," she said, rising gracefully to her feet. Her voice was melodic, with an accent that made English sound like music. "I speak for Emperor Valerius and the Etherian Empire in these proceedings." Ambassador Fletcher, the head of the human delegation, stepped forward with practiced diplomatic smoothness. "Your Highness, I am Ambassador Fletcher. We are honored by your presence and hopeful that we can find a path to peace between our peoples." But Zara's eyes never left Marcus. "And you are?" The question was clearly directed at him, though protocol demanded that Fletcher handle introductions. Marcus felt every gaze in the room focus on him as he stepped forward. "Captain Marcus Chen." "Your Highness, military escort." Something flickered in her expression's satisfaction, relief. "Captain Chen, I was hoping we would have a chance to meet." The words sent a chill down Marcus's spine. She'd been hoping to meet him? That suggested this encounter was no coincidence. But before he could process the implications, Chancellor Rith stepped forward with barely concealed irritation. "We could begin with the formal proceedings," the elderly Etherian suggested coldly. "There are many issues to discuss." For the next 2 hours, Marcus listened to carefully worded diplomatic exchanges about territorial boundaries, resource rights, and prisoner exchanges. It was standard negotiation protocol, the kind of political dance he'd observed before. But underneath the formal language, he sensed deeper currents at work. Princess Zara was brilliant, he realized. She deflected aggressive demands with graceful precision, offered concessions that sounded generous, but contained hidden limitations, and somehow managed to advance her position while making it seem like compromise. But more than that, she was watching him. Every few minutes her eyes would find his across the table, and Marcus felt that same electric connection he'd experienced during the battle. Finally, Ambassador Fletcher called for a recess. "Perhaps we could continue these discussions tomorrow." "It's been a long day for everyone." "An excellent suggestion," Zara agreed smoothly. "Chancellor Rith, please coordinate with Ambassador Fletcher regarding tomorrow's agenda. I believe some fresh air would be beneficial." As the room emptied, Marcus found himself moving toward the exit with the other humans. But a soft voice stopped. "Him, Captain Chen? Might I have a word?" He turned to find Princess Zara standing alone by the crystal table, her advisors having departed with his delegation. They were alone in the conference chamber, and Marcus was acutely aware that this violated about a dozen security protocols. "Your Highness, I'm not sure that's appropriate, please." The word was barely a whisper, but it carried such intensity that Marcus found himself walking back toward her. "I need to ask you something." She reached up and touched something at her throat, a crystal pendant that was glowing with soft light. "During the battle, when you saw me in the palace... Did you feel it?" Marcus's mouth went dry. "Feel what?" Recognition. The certainty that everything had changed. Her silver eyes searched his face desperately. "Tell me I'm not imagining this." He should lie. He should tell her he had no idea what she was talking about, and walk away. But looking into her eyes, Marcus found himself incapable of deception. "I felt it," he admitted quietly. "I felt like I knew you, even though we'd never met. Like I'd been looking for you my entire life without realizing it." The relief that washed over her features was profound. "The Heartstone has been glowing since that moment," she whispered, touching the pendant again. "According to our oldest legends, it only reacts to... (2.2.2) what?" She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for a leap into the unknown. "To one's destined mate." The words hung in the air between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. Marcus felt his world reorganize itself around this new reality. Destined mate. The concept S. Hold have been ridiculous, the stuff of fairy tales and romantic fantasies. But looking at her, feeling the pull that had drawn him across a battlefield to find her again, he couldn't dismiss it. "That's impossible," he said, but his voice lacked. "Conviction, is it?" Zara stepped closer, and Marcus caught her sense something like starlight and ocean spray. "Our species have been at war for 5 years, but neither side has ever been able to claim total victory. Perhaps that's because we were never meant to be enemies." Zara... Her name felt perfect on his tongue, like a prayer he'd been meaning to say his entire life. "The ancient prophecies speak of a time when Etherian and human bloodlines would unite to bring peace to the galaxy," she continued, her voice gaining strength. "I always thought they were myths. But what if they're not? What if this war has been driving us toward each other?" Marcus reached out without thinking, his hand coming to rest on her cheek. Her skin was warm and soft, and she leaned into his touch with a sigh that seemed to echo through his bones. "Even if that's true," he said quietly, "how could it work? Our people are killing each other. Your father is an emperor. Mine was a factory worker. You're royalty. I'm a soldier. Then we make it work," she said with quiet determination. Together, before Marcus could respond, alarms began wailing throughout the station. Red emergency lights bathed the conference chamber, and an automated voice announced, "Security breach in Docking Bay 7. All personnel evacuate immediately." Marcus's training kicked in instantly.
"We need to get you to safety."
But Zara was already moving toward the chamber's communication console, her fingers dancing over alien controls with practiced efficiency.
"This isn't a random attack," she
said grimly, reading the incoming data. "Someone doesn't want these negotiations to succeed." "Who? That," Zara said as explosions echoed through the station's hull, "is what we're going to find out." Together, as they ran toward the emergency exits, Marcus realized that everything had changed in the space of a single conversation. He was no longer just a soldier following orders. He was a man who'd found his destiny in the eyes of an alien princess. And he'd do anything to protect both her and the fragile hope for peace she represented, even if it meant betraying everything he'd once believed about the enemy. Chapter 4. Revelations and Betrayals. The attack on Meridian Prime was surgical in its precision. Marcus and Zara made their way through corridors filled with smoke and emergency lighting, station's hull groaning under the stress of weapons fire. But as they moved, Marcus began to notice something troubling about the pattern of destruction. "Damage is too specific," he muttered, pulling Zara behind cover as another explosion rocked the station. "Whoever's doing this knows exactly where to hit to cause maximum chaos without destroying critical systems." Zara's luminescent patterns flickered with stress as she checked her portable communication device. "I'm reading 15 ships on attack approach." "The signatures," she paused, her silver eyes widening in shock. "Marcus, those aren't Etherian vessels." "What do you mean?" The energy signatures are human. Your people are attacking the station. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. Impossible. My fleet was ordered to maintain defensive positions during the negotiations. But even as he said it, doubt crept in. The timing of this attack, coming just hours after his conversation with Zara, felt too convenient to be coincidence. And there had been something in Admiral Harrison's eyes during the briefing, a cold calculation that Marcus had chosen to ignore. "We need to reach the communication center," Zara said urgently. "If I can contact my father's fleet, no." Marcus grabbed her arm as she started to move. "If human ships are attacking, then someone in my command structure ordered it, which means they might be tracking our communications. Then what do you suggest?" Marcus looked around the damaged corridor, his tactical mind racing through possibilities. "We need to find out who's really behind this. And we need proof." They made their way deeper into the station, avoiding both human and Etherian security teams. Marcus's knowledge of military tactics helped them navigate the chaos, while Zara's understanding of the station's crystalline architecture guided them through passages that hadn't appeared on his briefing maps. Finally, they reached a maintenance section where the noise of battle was muffled to a distant rumble. Zara collapsed against a wall, her breathing labored, and Marcus noticed that her luminescent patterns had dimmed significantly. "Are you hurt?" "Exhausted," she admitted.
People.
"Draw energy from light and harmony. All this violence and chaos. It's like poison to my system." Marcus felt a surge of protective anger. "We'll get you out of here, I promise, will we?" Zara's eyes met his, and he saw fear there for the first time. Not fear of death, but something deeper. "Marcus, if your people ordered this attack, then everything between us is a lie. You could be part of this." The accusation stung because it was logical. From her perspective, he was the enemy, and this entire situation could be an elaborate trap. But looking at her, seeing the exhaustion and vulnerability she was trying so hard to hide, Marcus felt something crystallize inside his chest. "I'm not part of this," he said quietly, "and I'll prove it." He activated his personal communicator, knowing it would reveal their position but needing answers more than he needed safety. "Phoenix Base. This is Phoenix Leader. Request immediate explanation for the attack on Meridian Prime." Response was immediate and chilling. "Phoenix Leader, you are ordered to eliminate the Etherian delegation and return to base immediately." Marcus felt his blood turn to ice. "Repeat that order." The negotiations were a sham designed to eliminate key Etherian leadership. "You are to complete the mission and return to base." That is a direct order from Admiral Harrison. Zara had gone very still beside him, her luminescent patterns flickering with what he was learning to recognize as intense emotion. "They used you," she whispered. "Used both of us." Marcus stared at the communicator in his hand, understanding flooding through him like acid. The attack on her city hadn't been a tactical strike, it had been bait. Bait to draw out Etherian royalty for a diplomatic response. The negotiations, his assignment to the security detail, even their meeting in the conference chamber, all of it had been orchestrated. "Phoenix Leader, respond," came the voice through the communicator. Marcus looked at Zara, at the fear and betrayal in her silver eyes, and made the most important decision of his life. "Phoenix Base, this is Phoenix Leader. I'm afraid I can't." "Do that, Captain Chun. You are in direct violation of orders. Comply immediately, or you will be considered a traitor to humanity." "Then I guess I'm a traitor," Marcus said, and smashed the communicator against the wall. The silence that followed was deafening. Zara stared at him with an expression he couldn't read, her luminescent patterns shifting through colors he'd never seen before. "Why?" she whispered. "Because this is wrong? Because you're not my enemy? Because... ... He reached for her hand, marveling at how perfectly it fit in his. "Because I'd rather be a traitor to my species than a traitor to my heart." For a moment, Zara said nothing. Then she lifted their joined hands and pressed his palm against the glowing crystal at her throat. The heartstone pulsed with brilliant light, warm against his skin, and Marcus felt something fundamental shift inside him. "The bond," Zara breathed. "It's real. The prophecies were true." "What does that mean?" it means we're stronger together. Then apart, it means we have a chance to stop this war. Her eyes blazed with sudden determination. But first, we need to survive the next few hours. As if summoned by her words, the sound of approaching footsteps echoed through the maintenance corridor. Human voices speaking in the clipped tones of military operation. Search pattern Alpha. The princess is somewhere in this section. Marcus drew his sidearm, checking the charge. How many exits from this section? 3, but they'll have them covered. Zara was studying a wall panel, her fingers tracing patterns in the crystalline surface. Unless... Unless what? The station's emergency systems include escape pods, but they're designed for single-person evacuation. If we could reach Pod Bay 5... we'd have to go through them. Yes. Marcus looked at her, really looked at her. Princess Zara of the House of Eternal Stars, heir to an empire that spanned dozens of star systems, was willing to risk everything on the chance that an enemy soldier might keep his word. The trust in her eyes was humbling and terrifying. Then we go through them, he said. They emerged from the maintenance corridor like a storm-given form. Marcus's military training took over and he moved with lethal precision using his knowledge of human tactics against his former comrades. But it was Zara who surprised him. The elegant princess transformed into something fierce and dangerous, her hands weaving patterns in the air that somehow disrupted the attackers' weapon systems. Etherian combat training, she explained breathlessly as they fought their way toward the Pod Bay. Did you think we conquered half the galaxy through diplomacy alone? They reached Pod Bay 5 with human security forces closing in behind them. The escape pods were small, barely large enough for one person, but Marcus began the launch sequence anyway. This won't work, Zara said, looking at the cramped interior. These pods weren't designed for 2 people. Then we'll make it work, Marcus replied, echoing her words from the conference chamber. Together, they squeezed into the pod just as the bay doors exploded inward. Marcus slammed his hand on the launch control and they shot into space with crushing acceleration. Through the small viewport, he could see Meridian Prime burning. Human and Etherian ships locked in vicious combat around the station. Where are we going? Zara asked, pressed against him in the pod's tiny space. Somewhere safe. Somewhere we can figure out how to stop this war, and if we can't... Marcus looked down at her, at the woman who had become his anchor point in a universe. Gone mad? Then we'll find a way to build something better from the ashes. The escape pod carried them away from the battle, away from their respective fleets, into the vast darkness between stars. But Marcus no longer felt lost. For the first time in his life, he knew exactly where he belonged, in the space between species and war. There was room for something new, something that belonged neither to humanity nor to the Etherian Empire, but to the bond between 2 souls who had found each other across the greatest divide in the galaxy. The prophecy was real. Now they had to make it true. ## epilogue. A New Dawn 6 months later. Marcus stood on the observation deck of Haven Station, watching ships from both the human and Etherian fleets maintain their careful positions around the small outpost. The station itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, human practicality merged with Etherian elegance to create something that belonged fully to neither species and entirely to both. The latest reports from the border colonies, Zara said, approaching with a datapad in her hands. She wore simple clothes, now practical shipboard attire, rather than royal robes. But she carried herself with the same regal bearing that had first captured his attention. 3 more systems have agreed to the ceasefire protocols. Marcus took the pad, scanning the diplomatic summaries. After their escape from Meridian Prime, it had taken weeks to convince anyone to listen to them. Both sides had branded them traitors, and for a time they'd been alone in the galaxy with nothing but an escape pod and an impossible dream. But word had spread. Stories of the human captain and Etherian princess who had chosen love over war, who offered a different path forward. One by one, colony worlds and distant systems had reached out, desperate for an alternative to endless conflict. "How's your father taking the news?" Marcus asked. Zara's expression softened. Better than expected. The war was costing the Empire more than he admitted publicly. when I proved that the heart bond was real. She touched the crystal at her throat, which now pulsed with steady, warm light. Even he couldn't argue with ancient prophecy. The heart bond had been the key to everything. When Etherean scientists examined the connection between them, they discovered something unprecedented. A quantum entanglement at the cellular level that allowed them to share not just emotions, but memories and even certain abilities. Found he could sense Zara's thoughts across vast distances, while she had developed an intuitive understanding of human psychology that made her the most effective negotiator either species had ever seen. And the resistance factions. Growing smaller every day, Zara replied, moving to stand beside him at the observation window. It's hard to argue against peace when it's working. Marcus wrapped his arms around her, marveling as he did every day at the perfection of how they fit together. Admiral Harrison still has supporters in the human fleet. Let him, Zara said with quiet confidence. His kind of thinking belongs to the past. We're building the future. Through the viewport, Marcus could see the latest addition to Haven Stations. Docking facilities, a sleek vessel that bore design elements from both species. It's the first of what they hoped would be many collaborative projects, manned by mixed crews who were learning to work together despite their differences. The Council. Meeting is in an hour, Zara reminded him. Representatives from 18 systems want to formalize the peace accords? Nervous. Terrified, she admitted with a laugh. 6 months ago, I was a princess playing at diplomacy. I'm helping to reshape the galaxy. You're not doing it alone. She turned in his arms, her silver eyes bright with the same wonder he'd seen during their first meeting? No, we're doing it together. Marcus leaned down to kiss her, still amazed by the way her luminescent patterns brightened in response to his touch. The heart bond pulsed between them, carrying emotions and thoughts too complex for words. Love, certainly, but also purpose. Hope. The absolute certainty that they were exactly where they belonged. Marcus Zara whispered against his lips. I have something to tell you. Something in her tone made him pull back to look at her more closely. Her patterns were shifting to colors he'd never seen before, cycling through what looked like celebration and nervousness in equal measure. Is it the medical scans Dr. Walsh ran last week? They revealed something unexpected. Zara's hand moved to rest against her abdomen, and Marcus felt his world shift on its axis. It seems the heart bond has made certain biological impossibilities possible. Marcus stared at her, understanding flooding through him like dawn breaking. Over a new world, are you saying? I'm saying that, in about 7 months, our child is going to make the universe a very different place. The words hit him like a starship at full thrust. A child. The first being in galactic history to carry both human and Etherean genetic material. If the heart bond had been proof that their species could coexist, this was proof that they could become something entirely new. The prophecies, he breathed. Speak of a child who would unite the galaxy, Zara finished softly. A bridge between worlds, born of love instead of conquest. Marcus felt tears he didn't know he was capable of shedding. How is this possible? Our species are completely different biologically. Dr. Walsh thinks it's connected to the heart bond. The quantum entanglement didn't just link our minds, it somehow harmonized our genetic structures. Zara's hand covered his as he placed it gently on her still flat stomach. She's never seen anything like it. Zara's laugh was like music made of starlight. Etherean females can sense the gender of their children from the moment of conception. Our daughter is going to be remarkable, Marcus. I can feel her already curious, strong, eager to explore the universe we're building for her. Marcus pulled Zara closer, his mind reeling with the implications. Their child would grow up in a galaxy where the old divisions meant nothing, where human pragmatism and Etherean wisdom could flow together as naturally as breathing. She would be living proof that love could triumph over fear, that unity was stronger than division. What happens now? He asked. Now we finish what we started, Zara said, her voice strong with purpose. We build a peace that will last long enough for our daughter to inherit a galaxy worth living in. Through the viewport, more ships were arriving, vessels from systems that had never spoken to each other before, coming together under the banner of hope that two unlikely lovers had planted in the darkness. The war wasn't over yet, But for the first time in 5 years, Marcus could see its end approaching, and beyond that end, could see something even more precious, a beginning. The prophecy had spoken of unity born from the stars themselves, of a love that would reshape the galaxy. Standing here with Zara in his arms, and their unborn daughter safe between them, Marcus finally understood what the ancient texts had really been describing. Not just the end of a war, but the birth of a new kind of peace. Not just the union of two species, but the evolution of something greater than either could achieve alone. The future was uncertain, as futures always were. There would be more battles to fight, more hearts and minds to change, more bridges to build across the vast spaces between worlds. But for the first time since the war began, Marcus Chenformer, Captain Current Traitor, future father, was absolutely certain they would succeed. After all, they were no longer fighting for victory. They were fighting for love. And love, as the ancient prophecies had promised, was the one force in the universe strong enough to unite the stars themselves.